and it was about how Flutter is revolutionizing application development. And so I think he's actually the perfect person to take us through this session today. So without wasting any time, I'd like to welcome and hand over this session to Eric.
Guys, hope you're well. Really pleased to join you guys for today's session. Yeah, it was great to obviously connect with Adrian during the Dev Fest in November. Yeah, we connected over LinkedIn, and yeah, I'm just super pleased to meet every single one of you here. Yeah, my session will be quite short, short and hopefully sweet. Yeah, so without further ado, maybe I can just go ahead and share my screen. But yeah, before we start, maybe I can just get a few guys. I like hearing from the crowd. I like, not really the crowd, but like I like hearing from my audience. And what they expect from the session. And just at least getting a bit familiar with you guys. So yeah, if you're on the call, you'd like to say hello. I think Adrian, you're joined by um your community members. Yeah, if anyone, Fidel, if you'd like to say hello, please go ahead. Be great to just at least greet you guys. Yeah, Jire, hello. Yeah, it's great to be here as well. Anyone else? Okay, so yeah, I think we can just get started. Like I mentioned, hi Hamisi. Yeah, thank you for your greetings. So yeah, like I mentioned, today's session is on Flutter. Maybe let me just put this. Let me just present this. All right, so yeah, today we're going to be talking about Flutter and why Flutter is revolutionizing application development. Yeah, just an introduction on who I am. Yeah, so my name is Eric Moredi. This is me in the picture. So just want to talk briefly on some of the industry experience that I have. I work for an organization called PowerLearn Project, whose goal is to train 1 million developers in Africa by 2027. So we're a Pan-African organization in about 5 countries. That's Kenya, that's Tanzania, that is Rwanda. Previously we're in Zambia, previously in South Africa, and Nigeria. I don't know if I mentioned Nigeria. So yeah, basically what I do on a day-to-day basis is training. I have a background in software engineering, of course, but yeah, I do impart knowledge to about 600 learners on Flutter application development and web development as well, through scheduled live online meetings. Apart from that, maybe it's not here, but I did a bit of consultancy maybe about 2 years ago, just building websites and apps for people, for clients, individuals, and businesses, just helping them, get, uh, you know, um, their project up and running. So if that's e-commerce, if it's portfolio websites, if it's company websites, um, fintech apps, that kind of stuff. So I did that for a bit. Also, I'm a founder, so I founded a social enterprise called Shield. So yeah, we're an edtech. We focus on design thinking, which is an iterative approach to problem solving. We do that by setting up. So we're setting up innovation hubs. Setting up an innovation hub in Kibera. We're starting in Kibera, and we hope to grow to other underserved communities. So yeah, that's just a little bit about me. And yeah, let's just jump into our topic for today, which is on why Flutter is revolutionizing application development. So what is Flutter? Maybe you can just start with the basics. I know Adrian has built a couple of projects in Flutter, but what is Flutter, guys? Flutter, you may be familiar, is a cross-platform um, development framework. It's used with the Dart programming language, and essentially what it enables us to do is to build cross-platform applications from a single code base. So as opposed to developing for different code bases, you can develop for one, and even for desktop apps using Flutter, right? So who you might be wondering, of course, this is not the first framework to solve this problem. You might be familiar with Ionic, um, which was used with Angular. A lot of Ionic projects would be used with Angular to create cross-platform applications, basically using actual HTML and CSS to build web pages, and then adding modularity to your applications using Angular, right? So yeah, Flutter is not the first framework that's trying to solve this problem. You might also be probably familiar with React Native, which also solves the same problem. But one thing to be clear about is all of these frameworks, all of these programming languages are only as effective as how they are used, right? And one thing I like to tell people is that technology follows business, right? Not the other way around. Technology follows business. So your goal as a as a software engineer, your goal as a developer is to create systems that solve business needs, right? Not the other way around. Business does not follow technology. We create technology to scale business solutions and to solve them quickly, right? Um, so why do we feel that Flutter is good for this? Why do we feel that Flutter enables us to create products and solutions efficiently, quickly, better than others, right? So yeah, I think I've already spoken about what Flutter is. So yeah, it's used to create beautiful and powerful apps. It allows for developing high quality native applications for iOS and Android. Like I mentioned a bit earlier as well, uh, Flutter is based on the Dart programming language. Um, and in Flutter 3.7, null safety was introduced that prevents null reference errors. So for me, for me is a big thing, and why I believe Flutter and Dart used together are great is because of just this feature, null safety, helping to prevent null reference errors, being able to debug your code probably 2 times faster than in other programming languages um, really is a blessing. And just that feature in and of itself is one reason why Flutter apps going going from idea to MVP using Flutter is just usually fantastic. Better development experience. I can say that most people say that yeah, development is about maybe 70% or maybe 30% coding and 70% debugging, and Flutter, due to the introduction of um, null safety, really does go an extra step and just helps us have a great developer experience, um, helping us to debug our code very very quickly. It's also based on object oriented programming techniques. So yeah, if you're coming from a background of Java or any other OOP language, transitioning into Dart with Flutter would be a breeze, right? So yeah, in Flutter 3.7, one thing that's really really great is that yeah, they've incorporated improvements to accessibility. There's more support for screen readers and better keyboard navigation. It's also more accessible to users with disabilities. Um, they've done one thing which is also updated Cupertino widgets. That means um, your Cupertino widgets are the widgets that are used in iOS apps, right? So updated Cupertino widgets create a better, more native feel to your Flutter applications, which is really fantastic. So yeah, sometimes with like other frameworks like Ionic, because sometimes you find that it's based on HTML and CSS, and then integrating Angular for modularity. um, the look and feel on probably a native application, the look and feel of your application on an iPhone or on an iPad doesn't really feel like it's really like an iPhone application. So yeah, updated Cupertino widgets mimic the behavior and design of iOS apps, which is really fantastic. Like I mentioned a bit earlier, there's improved debugging tools. You might be familiar with hot reload, which essentially helps you track and see the progress of your application in real time. And just the fact that it's a framework that's still in development, and that has been developed by Google, you're sure that you can access great documentation and tooling support, which which makes it a lot easier for developers to understand and use. So yeah, one that's one of the advantages that I've seen in working with Flutter. So yeah, talk about three things um, that I just want to discuss. Um, why Flutter, has probably an edge in comparison to other cross-platform application frameworks. Three things: just the performance, the UI components and development APIs, as well as documentation and tooling, right? So let's talk about performance. I think I've sort of spoken briefly about them throughout the presentation, but let me just get into a bit of like nitty gritties for the next couple of minutes, not unless someone might have a question. But yeah, just its performance. So it does provide better performance than React Native due to its compiler, which is not as ahead of time compilation, in comparison to React Native, which relies on the JavaScript bridge to communicate with native components, which results in slower performance. So what this does is, you're obviously familiar with how, or you may be familiar with how code is compiled to um, is compiled to binary, which your hardware can actually make sense. Hardware on your computer or hardware on your phone can actually make sense of. So why Flutter performs better is because to it compiles its code compiles directly to um, native functionalities of your hardware, so of your phone, of your laptop, right? But React Native does rely on something called the JavaScript bridge, to communicate with native components, right? So yeah, that's really interesting. React Native relies on the JavaScript bridge, which communicates with native components, which does result in slow performance. I remember in Ionic, when I was doing a bit of work in Ionic. I think the compiler that we used to use was it called Cordova, right? So you'd find that Cordova or Capacitor, you'd have to integrate some of those packages into your app, which would allow you to access native functionalities on your project, right? But with Flutter, due to the ahead of time compiler, you're able to access native from native. When I say native, I mean um, iOS, Android, desktop functions um, are a lot quicker, right? So that's performance. Yes, if you're with me, please drop a one in the chat. I just want to confirm that you guys are with me. Just drop a one in the chat if you're with me still. Let me check the chat. So Adrian, Joshua, Kadima, Jesse. Oh, damn! Someone was saying that they are not hearing me. I'm just seeing the chat now. Hope you're maybe hearing me better now. But yeah, I can see you guys are with me. Thank you for your responses. Very, very glad that you're with me. So that's performances. Tulisema mambo ni matatu. So performance, we've covered performance. Um, spoken about its own rendering engine, Skia, which is used to render UI components. This means that Flutter apps have complete control over the rendering process and can achieve native performance. And just due to the JavaScript bridge, you'll find that React is a little bit slower. So yeah, sometimes React Native apps can sometimes experience performance issues. Yes. So yeah, next thing is I wanted to talk about. So we talked about performance. Next thing I want to talk about is ready-made UI components. So Flutter has many ready-made UI components like buttons, lists, etc. It also offers development APIs for app development. React Native obviously provides many UI components, but it does not offer much flexibility when it comes to customizing them. I think for me, this is one thing that I really appreciate about Flutter, just the ready-made UI components that you can draw from and integrate into your applications. And then also, I think I spoke about it earlier, documentation and tooling. Yeah, so Flutter offers extensive documentation and tooling support. Um, React Native also feels like React Native is the enemy. It's not. But yeah, it also offers extensive documentation. Um, but the very fact that Flutter is based on Google and it's constantly being iterated on, um, the tooling support on React Native is somewhat limited compared to Flutter. So what's the conclusion, guys? I've been speaking for about 15 minutes. What's the conclusion? What have you learned from this session? Um do you what are your takeaways? Or like what do you take away from this session? So yeah, the choice between frameworks usually comes down to individual needs and preferences. Um right? So yeah, it really comes down to individual needs, preferences, and these could be business needs. This could be maybe you go to a company and yeah, perhaps maybe they work in this framework, or maybe for one reason or another they want to work on this other framework. So the choice really comes down to your needs and preferences. Like for example, at PLP, we train in Flutter application development. We believe that if someone has a great understanding of or a solid foundation in object-oriented programming principles, leveraging that and transitioning into being a developer that can build for cross-platform apps could be a bit easier, but other people still use just other frameworks to build their apps. Honeycoin, for example, or Peer, you might be familiar with the app. It's a local company here. They use Ionic and Angular for their application development. It really is. It just goes down, and that's why I said earlier on. Technology follows business. Your goal as an engineer, your goal as a CTO, your goal as a dev, and I'll say this because I feel like that's one of the ways that would distinguish you from the crowd. One of the ways is to be able to, even as you're coding, be able to relate this to real world problems and solve for real world problems using code. So yeah, I talked about Honeycoin using still Ionic. I think the worldwide, usage of Ionic right now is less than 20%. Right, not many people use that framework anymore. Fingo, you might have heard of them as well. Another fintech here in Kenya. Um, um, they're one of the only fintech companies that have been issued like a PSP, payment service provider license, meaning that they are operating in the same space as M-Pesa and Safaricom. Their code base is built on Flutter, right? Um, because of different reasons. Because of I speak to the engineers and they tell me, yeah, this is why we probably prefer this to that other framework. So yeah, back to this discussion, we're just tying things up. If you need a fast and reliable platform that allows you to create mobile apps quickly, Flutter might be a better option. But like we said, all of this usually come back down to individual needs and preferences. So at this juncture, Adrian, I'm so grateful for this opportunity. I will take questions and then we can just wrap up this session. Asanteni sana, barikiweni.
Sure. Thank you,
Yeah.
Eric. So maybe since we have some beginners here who
Mm.
maybe haven't heard of Flutter or built apps, what are some of the basic skills that are maybe needed to start learning Flutter?
Great. Thank you so much for that question. Yeah, so some of the basic skills I would say, always start with, of course, if because Flutter is a framework, I would recommend, before getting into frameworks, to becoming a bit familiar with programming languages. Dart is a programming language, Python is a programming language, Java. Not to scare you, but I mean, if you want to start building with Flutter applications, what I would just recommend, go download the SDK, and just create a starter application. Just go ahead, run in your terminal, Flutter create my first app after obviously downloading the SDK. Create that, see how it works. Um, I'd also recommend tutorials. But I think you dropped the link in the chat to Powerland project. We're actually taking a cohort of about 5,000 budding tech enthusiasts. I think I'd shared this with you, Adrian. If you'd like to, learn Flutter, um, text me personally. I think I can also drop my number in the chat, or you can reach out via LinkedIn. But yeah, come learn Flutter with us at Powerland Project. Yeah, Adrian, I hope I've answered your question. Maybe I can take a few more.
Yes, you have.
Yeah, awesome.
So Eston has a question. He's
Mm,
asking whether we'll have a follow-up session. So we were to plan a physical one. So I
yeah,
guess, yes, Eston, we'll have one probably next week, Thursday, from maybe, let's say, 5 to 6 p.m. And this will be a physical, practical session where you'll now be able to build just a basic Flutter starter app and see, yeah.
fantastic. Yeah, Adrian, I'll make time 100%. Next week, Thursday, confirm with me. Yeah, we'll come to Quer. We will be there no matter what.
So once we
Mm,
confirm Eston, I'll share in the group the actual room where we'll be holding the
mm,
session.
yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so next week, if you guys like, we can come build a starter app, maybe integrate some of the features we talked about in this session. We talked about some ready-made UIs. We can see where to access these UIs, um, build a starter app, and just even deploy it on our Android on our Android devices or iOS devices. Yeah, that'd be great. I think that's yeah, we should have a follow up. Yeah.
Sure, sure. Let me just do that. Give me about 1 minute. I'll share with you.
Yeah, but super glad to meet you guys virtually. I have to go. I have to hop off at about 6:40. There's another meeting I'm heading to. But yeah, very very glad to meet you all. Purity, Jeremiah, Jesse, Amisi, Fidel, Eric, Morgan, Eston, Joshua, Kadima, Wangoi, Joy, Emmanuel, Lennox, Zach. Very 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 glad to meet you all virtually.